Alright, are we going? Microphone, are you there? Are the YouTubes working? Sorry, I'm a little bit frazzled from I've been having cat issues. Are we going on the YouTube? I don't see me coming up on the YouTube. Hello there, and welcome to another live stream. There we are, I'm coming up on the YouTube. I'm checking my thing. It looks like I got like a 15-second delay here, so let me close that. Welcome to another live stream. Here we're just answering questions, doing a little live Q&A, and so if you're here on the live stream, say hello in the chat, let me know where you're from. If you have any questions, let me know, or just go ahead and let me know where you are in school, like what kind of stuff you're studying. So I'm always curious to know where people are, what they're studying, what you're working on this semester. So if you're here live, go ahead and just drop a hello in the chat. If you're here watching the replay, let me turn my music off. I always forget about that. If you're here on the replay, you can just say hello in the comments. But here, all we're doing is just answering questions, doing a Q&A. So if you have questions, put them up. But I think we started with one that I had in the comments. Let me see if I can bring it up. Ooh, it's a big one. Let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger. I can hear my cat in the other room, so sorry. First of all, I think when I switch to this camera angle, there's a microphone delay that either way, there's going to be some like 4-frame delay, whether I just have to choose whether it's the main camera or this camera. So kind of a hectic morning because my cat has decided to get real zoomy at the most inconvenient time. So it's like 15 minutes before this, he decided he wanted to run around and jump on everything. So I think I can hear him in the other room playing with his miniature pool table. So if I ever have videos where there's a clacking, then that's why. It's because the cat is playing with his pool table. But let's go ahead and get into this right away. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. TCM Talks is, eventually that's going to be a name of a show. I'm just going to be like, this is our weekly TCM Talk. I think office hours is good for now, but whenever I want to rant about something, I'm just going to call it a TCM Talk. That makes it sound more legit. You said that most common cause for headaches in men is liver yang rising, while in women it's blood deficiency. From my TCM teacher, I learned that fire is excess heat rising up, while liver yang is mostly of a QT problem with yin blood not being able to hold yang in its place because one or both being deficient. What's the underlying cause of yang rising that you're talking about? So yes, I would say that's generally correct. And this is one of those weird things where I'm not always very careful with my terminology. I tend to just group these together and say liver heat, liver fire, liver yang rising. And so this is kind of interesting because I feel like I've learned this both ways, that I think most of my American teachers said it this way, where liver yang rising is a phenomenon where it's implied that there's some underlying liver yin deficiency, and because of that deficiency, the yang is overactive and rising upwards. But then I also feel like I might be making this up, I might be misremembering this, but I think I had a Chinese teacher who was very insistent that I was like, no, liver yang rising is an excess condition. It just refers to the upward movement of liver yang. So I think here we can say that, remember, liver belongs to the wood phase. When we say wood, we mean a tree. Trees grow upward and they spread their branches outward. And so that's the direction of the liver. That the liver just naturally has an upward direction. So you can think about a tall tree growing upwards. But then the liver also has an action of spreading its branches outwards. It spreads the qi into the limbs, just like a tree spreads its branches outward. So when we talk about, if we talk about like counterflow liver qi, what we really mean is that the liver qi is not spreading. So think about like cold hands and feet with Suni-san. If the liver qi is stagnant, it's not spreading into the limbs, so you get cold hands and feet, and that's often referred to as counterflow or rebellious liver qi. It's not the upward movement, it's the unable to spread outward. But yeah, the liver tends to go upward, and so that's kind of what I think about with the liver, is just there's stuff going upward. I think that, so basically I went and looked this up in Nigel Weissman's Practical Dictionary of Chinese Medicine, and he doesn't use the term liver yang rising. He says it's not hyperactive ascent of liver yang or hyperactive ascending hyperactive liver yang. It's those four words in some order. He calls it ascending hyperactive liver yang. And so there he says that yes, this is due to an imbalance between the yin and the yang of the liver, where the yang is moving upwards. So kind of the way I interpret that is that there's more yang than yin. Whether that's because of an excess of yang or deficiency of yin, there's more yang than yin, and the yang is moving upward. But then he goes on to say that this is typically due to liver yin deficiency, where there's not enough yin anchoring things down, and the liver yang is flaring upward. When we talk about a pure excess condition, he uses a separate term, liver fire flaring upward, and that's just a pure excess heat condition where that fire is flaring upward. We have an additional term, internal stirring of liver wind, and this is this excessive movement of the liver due to any cause, whether it's liver yin deficiency, liver fire flaring upward. Excessive movement of the liver can stir wind, and we call that internal stirring of liver wind. So according to Bensky, yes, that's kind of the pattern here, is that there's not enough liver yin anchoring things down, and so the yang becomes hyperactive and goes upward. But then he goes on to say that this is it's kind of like the liver yin deficiency is the root and the liver yang rising is the branch, and so it's a deficient at its root but excess at its branch. And I think that's maybe why one of my teachers is saying that liver yang rising is an excess condition, because when we're talking about the actual upward movement of yang, we consider that an excess condition. And I think it's also interesting to note here when we talk about the treatment principle for liver yang rising. I think most normal people would say we anchor liver yang rising. I think Nigel Weissman says we calm the liver and subdue yang. So you either anchor yang or you subdue yang. But when we talk about that as a treatment strategy, we're basically talking about that as if it were an excess pattern. So if you think about our herbs that subdue liver yang or anchor liver yang rising, it tends to be these heavy medicinals like longu, mu li, dragon bone and oyster shell, daijie, hematite, shijue ming, abalone shell. It's all these heavy things that we say they subdue liver yang or they anchor liver yang rising. But these herbs do not have an action of tonifying liver yin. If we want to do that, we need to add in separate tonifying herbs in order to do that. So I think this is it's maybe getting a little pedantic about what's actually going on here. And honestly, I kind of feel like in a clinical application, it doesn't really matter all that much, because if somebody has a lot of liver heat, a lot of liver fire, we could call that liver fire flaring upwards, but very quickly that liver fire is going to start to consume the yin. And so even if it starts out as an excess condition, it's going to eventually have some amount of deficiency. So it's not like a binary, is it excess or is it deficient, but it's more, to what extent is there liver excess, and to what extent is there liver deficiency, and how am I going to treat those? Like maybe we could relate this to when we talk about spleen qi deficiency with excess dampness. It's kind of like the two really, it's deficiency and excess, but the two go together, where if a person has spleen qi deficiency, the spleen is going to fail to transform dampness, and we're going to end up with excess dampness. But if a person has excess dampness, it's going to encumber the spleen and weaken the spleen, and you're going to end up with spleen qi deficiency. So it's kind of like they go together. So is it an excess condition or is it a deficiency condition? I think it kind of depends on which came first and the degree of which one. Maybe their spleen is slightly weak, but that's creating a lot of dampness. Maybe you want to address the dampness first and kind of just not do so much tonifying. So I think it's kind of the same thing here, that when you see someone in a clinic, that you have to kind of gauge, like, to what extent is it deficiency and to what extent is it excess. And then just keep in mind that when we look at a lot of our formulas, we tend to do both at the same time anyway. Like even if we look at things like, basically like we said, a lot of those anchoring herbs don't actually tonify yin, so we have to add in additional herbs to tonify yin. But even if we're dealing with an excess condition, we know that excess liver fire is eventually going to burn up the fluids and is eventually going to burn up the yin. So we usually add in some yin tonifying herbs anyway, even if only as a preventative measure. And so I think it's kind of like, I guess what I'm saying is, technically, according to the book, according to when you look this up, if you follow Nigel Weissman, I actually didn't bother looking up in Bensi, but if you follow Nigel Weissman, he'll say liver yang rising is a condition where there's more yang than yin, and this is usually due to liver yin deficiency or liver and kidney yin deficiency, and that's why the yang is flaring upward. It's also kind of interesting when he talks about the pulse here. He says the pulse is rapid and thin or rapid and forceful. So I think that's, again, telling us, is it relatively more deficient or excess? If it's rapid and thin, that would point to there's more liver yin deficiency. If it's rapid and excess, that would point to there's more yang excess. So according to that, yes, it's true. So we can differentiate between liver yang rising. It's implied there's some underlying yin deficiency versus liver fire flaring upward. We're saying that's a pure excess heat condition. Those are the two differences. Bensky, when you look at formulas like Jungan Shifeng Tong, he uses his term upward gushing of qi, and you're like, what does upward gushing of qi mean? And that's really interesting. It's like when the qi stagnates, the qi goes upward, but it's not only the liver qi. Once the liver qi stagnates, then the stomach qi will stagnate, and the stomach qi will rebel upwards, and then the lung qi will get constrained, and the lung qi will rebel upwards, so everything's moving upward. So I kind of feel like this is just, there's upward movement. You got to figure out why that upward movement is occurring and do something to counter it. So kind of back to the original thing, this original statement about headaches. Basically, maybe the way I would clarify that is I feel like when I say with women, headaches are usually due to a blood deficiency. I mean that there's not enough blood nourishing. There's not enough blood moving upward to nourish the head, and that's why you get these headaches. And so you can diagnose that because you'll see other signs of blood deficiency. They'll have poor sleep. They'll have ridges in their nails. They'll have weak or brittle nails. Their hair is brittle, or their hair falls out frequently. Periods tend to be light or short, things like that. So you have other signs of liver blood deficiency, and headache is one of those signs. They might have muscle tension. Again, blood deficiency can lead to internal stirring of wind, and that's going to be like spasm and muscle tension. Think like restless leg syndrome or clenching of the jaw. Basically, there's not enough blood to nourish the sinews, so they tighten up. But those are all blood deficiency signs. Whereas I talk about headaches in men, it's usually some sort of liver condition, liver excess, and there's too much stuff going upward. And so maybe it's just simple to leave it at that, is that there's too much ascending, there's too much going upward, and we have to figure out why that is. Maybe the person is stressed and they have liver qi stagnation. That liver qi stagnation is leading to heat, and now that heat is moving upward. So our treatment principle is going to be smooth liver qi and clear heat. Or maybe they're just a very hot person. Not only do they have headaches, they have a red face and red eyes, and they're a loud, shouty person. Maybe this is true excess liver fire. They have liver fire flaring upward. We need to clear the fire and descend the liver yang. Maybe there's some underlying liver yin deficiency, and we need to anchor the liver yang rising. So I think it kind of depends on what's going on. So that's kind of what I meant from that. I don't know if that helps, or if I just made things more confusing and talked myself in circles. Tatiana, hello from Puerto Rico. Oh, you're in Virginia. Awesome. Alex is here again. Hey, Alex, thanks for being here. Erica is studying for Kale after 10 years of practice in another state. Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that. I moved out of California, and turns out renewing your California license is really expensive. And so I just let it expire. And so I think now it's like I can never move back to California, because I do not want to take that California exam again, because it's really annoying. I think actually I think all boards are annoying. It's not... People have been asking me about like study tips for boards. I don't know. I think boards are dumb and annoying, so I don't really have any great advice other than just try to get through it. Hi, in Florida. Staying for boards for herbs. That's awesome. I'm gonna I just re-recorded all the videos for the formula review course. I'm gonna go back and now re-record the videos for the single herb review course. But then I want to create some specific videos just for stuff people talk about for boards. So apparently people are asking questions like, what are the herbs that treat stones, either kidney stones or gallbladder stones? What herbs are contraindicated during pregnancy? Stuff like that. So I may make a short series of things for people like that. Hi, Laura. Thanks for coming in from San Antonio. Jinten says, I'm from India. There aren't any courses here for acupuncture and medicine field. Any suggestions or any online courses where I can learn a certified course? Honestly, I don't know. It's kind of like I'm just familiar with the laws in America, and so I only know about our certification process. It seems like this would be very difficult. I think that acupuncture you need to learn in person. Because you're doing point location, you're sticking needles in people. It's something that I don't think it can be learned fully online. Maybe you can learn some of the background theory online, but I think in order to actually do it, you need somebody showing you in person how to do it. So it could be that you have to find somebody who already does it and go from and like basically apprentice with somebody who actually does it. I'm not sure there's a good online way to do it. Good morning. Greetings. So let me know if you have any questions. I didn't really prepare anything other than my liver yang rising spiel. So if y'all don't have any questions to put in the chat, I'm gonna have to go back and actually look stuff up. So let me know if you have anything here. Otherwise, I can let me go find some YouTube comments that I'm sure people have asked questions. Either I can answer questions or we can talk about the difference between herbs and herbs. That's another fun thing we can talk about. Apparently I upset a lot of people in the UK by my pronunciation of herbology. So we can get into a discussion about the correct pronunciation of herbology. Spoiler alert, the Americans are correct on this one. Boop boop ba-doo. Oh, I need to go to YouTube Studio. Boop boop ba-doo. Just looking for some questions to answer. Because nobody's asking questions in the chat. Oh, this is a good one. I just put up a short on Muli-san, and so this is a question here. Is your cat's name Meow? So I've been including a lot of my cat. If you want to sign up for the email list, the email list page has pictures of my cat on it. So sign up for the email list, and you'll get pictures of my cat. What's my cat's name? I kind of call my cat Meow. I never really came up with a good name for the cat. So I found this cat at the farm. It's very possible I stole the neighbor's cat, but I found this cat at my dad's farm. So I was trying to think of names, and at first I thought it was a girl, and then it turns out like it's hard to tell with kittens, and my dad just always called it a she. So I just like went along with him and called it a she, and then like 6 months later, it's like, no, this is clearly a male cat. I think my dad wanted to call the cat Cuthbert, and I thought that was like, who names a cat Cuthbert? Apparently Cuthbert is a Northumbrian, not just a monk. I think he's a saint. He was like a saint from the 1400s. So I didn't want to call the cat Cuthbert, and so I never came up with a name for the cat. So we just kind of meow at each other. I actually don't meow. He tends to trill more than he meows. So he goes like, and so that's what I do. That's what I call it. So I don't really have a name for the cat, but I occasionally call him just Kitty or Meow. So, or Little Meower. He likes to meow. Sometimes he likes to dig, and I call him Little Digger. Or he likes to snooze, and I call him a snoozer. So that's the story behind the cat. Why are you popping up here? Can liver yang rising come directly from liver blood deficiency? Maybe. Typically, when you have patterns of liver blood deficiency, the patient is going to feel cold. In fact, in Japanese style acupuncture, they actually have a pattern called liver yang deficiency. And in TCM, this doesn't really exist. If you talk to like Chinese people, they're like liver yang deficiency. That doesn't exist. The liver is already yang. There's no way it can become deficient. If anything, there's going to be excess yang. But Japanese style people have this, have a pattern called liver yang deficiency, and what they kind of mean is liver blood deficiency, that the liver blood is supposed to warm the body. That's one of the functions of blood, is it's supposed to be warming. So when they say liver yang deficiency, they're saying there's not enough liver blood warming the body, and that's why the patient feels cold. And so generally speaking, when we say liver blood deficiency, the patient is going to feel cold. And sometimes that's a question that comes up when people are like, what's the difference between liver yin deficiency and liver blood deficiency? Because blood is the yin substance of the liver, so how are they different? And that's one of the main differences, is temperature. That with liver yin deficiency, the person is going to have heat signs. With liver blood deficiency, the person is typically going to have cold signs. Now, there are some exceptions for this. Like if we look at the formula Dongui Bushui Tong. Dongui Bushui Tong is in the, I'm actually not sure if it's in the tonify blood category. There's a tonify blood, and there's a formulas that tonify both qi and blood. I think it may have switched categories between editions of Bensky, but I think it's in the tonify blood category, even though the qi verb is huang qi, which tonifies qi. But this is for a condition of heat due to blood deficiency. And it's kind of that similar idea that the blood is a yin substance. When blood is deficient, it can't anchor the yang qi. The yang qi has nothing to hold on to, and so it starts to float upward, and you see yang signs. So that is possible. I don't think we would actually call that liver yang rising. That's just kind of more general heat on the surface. It's not liver yang rising when we talk about like eye issues, headaches, dizziness, and things happening in the head. So normally I would say liver yang rising is more about liver yin deficiency, or liver and kidney yin deficiency, because those two kind of tend to go together. So I think it would be more of a yin deficiency. Blood deficiency, possibly, but you're going to see more like cold signs, lack of nourishment. Jacqueline is studying small intestine point functions and warm acid release the exterior herbs. Awesome. I think like small intestine channel is about like where I stopped on the page. So I'm going to do some more herbs and then get back to acupuncture points. Ooh, I'm a second year in England. Could you talk about 5-element acupuncture and the element within the element? Example, a middle person has a fire imbalance too. So, full disclosure, I am not a 5-element practitioner. I took one semester in 5-element acupuncture, and one of the teachers was a J.R. Worsley 5-element practitioner, and I would hang out with him in the clinic sometimes. So I don't actually know a whole lot about 5-element acupuncture, but here's what I'll tell you about this. When you talk about the element within the element, is that a lot of times, so basically in J.R. Worsley 5-element acupuncture or 5-element style, they are diagnosing people what normal people would say according to their element, according to which of the 5 elements. They refer to it as a CF, a causative factor, and if you say you're doing a 5-element diagnosis, I don't want to say they get their knickers in a twist, but they're like, no, it's a CF, it's a causative factor, it's what's got... Anyway, instead of saying it's an element, we can say it's a CF. And I remember one of the things my this 5-element teacher would say is, a lot of times that yes, we can say the element within the element, or they have a primary causative factor and then a secondary and maybe even a tertiary causative factor. And a lot of people are really good. They think they're seeing the primary causative factor, but they're actually seeing the secondary one. So I think there's a few things we can say about this. One is, when trying to understand this, sometimes I would think about it as colors. That basically we don't just have 5 colors. Colors exist on a continuum. So you can say this is green. Sometimes like you have a green that like it's just green. It's very green. No one would argue that it's green. Sometimes you can take some green and you mix in a little bit of blue, and it's still green, but it's a bluish green, or it's a turquoise green. Or sometimes you have some green and you mix in a little bit of yellow, and it's still green. You would, if someone said, "What color is this?" you would still say it's green, but it's kind of a yellowish green. And so I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about the element within the element, that most people are not 100% wood. It's kind of just the same way that most colors are not 100% green. They're green with some other colors mixed in. And so we can, when we say the primary element, we're like, how would we describe the color? This is green. That's the primary CF. But then when we go a step further and say, well, it's a yellowish green, it's like yellow would be the secondary CF, but green is still the primary. So that's the way I think about it. Another interesting thing, I remember having a discussion with him when we were talking about grief, like, because a lot of times we take a very simplistic approach. You say, like, oh, the lung is grief. If a person has grief, we do lung 3 because it does something with the corporeal soul. And his point there was, what he said to me was, remember, each of the channels has a metal point. And so you can like, it's not just like use lung 3 to treat grief. It's not just use the lung to treat the grief, but remember that each of the channels has a metal point. And sometimes the way I interpret that as anybody can experience grief. Everybody will experience grief in some way, but maybe depending on their constitution, they'll experience it in a different way. So maybe you have a wood person experiencing grief, and when they experience that grief, the grief is a metal emotion, but they're experiencing it in a wood way. Like, I once had a patient that she had a lot of grief due to her father passing away, but I think that grief, she was a very wood person, so that grief was expressed in a very angry way. So not only was she grieving, but she was angry that he left her, sort of thing. And so that's what I think about it, as like, oh, she's grieving, but she's grieving in a very wood way. So, and like I said, I'm not a 5-element practitioner, so I don't know how they would do that. Maybe they would do the metal point on the wood channel, or maybe they would do the wood point on the metal channel. I'm not entirely sure, but I think I think the point here is that it does get a little bit more complex than just like, and this emotion is attached to this element, and we treat that element. You can play around with it a little bit more and realize that things are going to be expressed differently. And sometimes this is very interesting, where you run into this problem where I feel like a person has a certain element, but they're experiencing problems that are not related to that element. So you might get a person like, oh, this person is very stressed. They're a very stressed person. They get angry. They're shouting, and like, yeah, they're experiencing a lot of wood problems, but I think they have an earth constitution. Like, you're an earth person with wood problems. And that does present an interesting thing, talking about like branch and root. It's like, if you have an earth person with wood problems, do you treat earth, or do you treat wood, or can you do both? Yeah, I don't know if that's actually very helpful. I'm just kind of rambling right now, so I don't know if that helps. The element within the element. And yeah, I think you would have to talk to a 5-element person about how they would specifically treat that. If you have either like we said, an earth constitution with wood problems, is it really just an earth thing, and can you just go to earth? Or if you have this sort of mixture where like, this person is green, but they're a yellowish green. They're wood, but they're an earthy wood. And how do you go about treating that? I think J.R. Worsley 5-element people have their own ideas about that. I'm kind of thinking about this as another way that sometimes I would explain 5 elements to people, in terms of constitution. Because again, some people, like when you try to, especially when you, like, if you're just trying to explain the elements to your patients or constitutional types to your patients, people tend to interpret it as, this is a wood person, this is an earth person, this is a metal person, because that's the most simplistic way to present it. Or when we talk about we want to have a person have balance there, when we say, oh, we want to balance your constitution, does that mean you should have equal amounts of all 5 elements? Does that mean you should be 20% fire, 20% wood, 20% earth, 20% metal, and 20% water? And at least my understanding is no, that's not the case. So sometimes the way I think about it is people are like a garden. And remember, there are different types of gardens. So some people are flower gardens. They have a lot of flowers. Some people are tree gardens, arboretums. They're mostly trees. Maybe their garden is 80% trees and 10% flowers and 10% everything else. Maybe some people are a vegetable garden. They're 60% vegetables, 30% trees, and 10% everything else. So everybody has their own mixture or their own makeup of what their garden looks like, and that's what makes the world a beautiful place, that every garden is a little bit different. So our job as healers is not to say, oh, you need to be 20% trees and 20% flowers and 20% shrubbery and 20% vegetables. When we say we want to balance things out, we're saying whatever type of garden you are, we want to make sure that that garden is thriving. So if you're an arboretum, we want to make sure that your arboretum is healthy and thriving. If you're a flower bed, we want to make sure that flower bed is healthy and thriving. And we're not going to impose our own values and say, oh, this person is a vegetable garden, we need to plant more trees. That's not necessarily what we're doing. We're looking at this flower garden and saying, how do we make that thrive? And basically, this kind of helps us diagnostically, because it's like if you're an arboretum, if you have a tree garden, you tend to have tree problems, and so that just helps us out when you say this person has a tree constitution. We just know that people with a tree constitution tend to have tree problems. And here's what's very interesting: is sometimes you get a patient that they come in and they say, "Oh, I have this problem going on. My flowers are sick. My flowers aren't healthy." And you say, great, that's awesome. Your flowers aren't healthy. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to trim your tree branches. And they're like, what do you mean you're going to trim my tree branches? I just told you I have a flower problem. Why are you addressing my trees when I clearly have this flower problem? And you say, I know that you have a flower problem, but because you are very heavily a tree garden, what's happening is your tree branches are overgrown, and that's creating too much shade. These pine needles are falling into the soil and making the soil too acidic. So even though you're presenting with a flower problem, the solution is to cut back your trees. And once we do that, then your flowers will bloom better. So it could be that even if a person comes in with a flower problem, because they're a tree person, you're going to address that by treating their trees. So even if a person comes in with an earth problem or a spleen issue, maybe the way you treat it is by addressing wood. And that might seem weird at first, or like, I told you I have digestive systems, why are you treating my liver T stagnation? Well, it's like the reason your digestive system, or your digestive problems exist is because your liver is overacting. So I think we can, that's another way I think about constitutions is, so on the one hand, you can think about it as colors, and we have a mixture of colors. You don't just say, oh, this is green, and stop there. You can say, oh, some people are more of a yellowish green, they're earth and wood. Some people are more of a bluish green, I don't think people are really water and wood. Maybe they're more fire and wood. Is there such a thing as reddish green? I'm not very good with colors. Maybe this is a terrible analogy. Or the other analogy I use is, like, think about this garden thing where there are different types of gardens, and you're just trying to make the garden healthy. Oh, this looks like a case study. I'm not sure if I want to comment on specific case studies because this is not medical advice. Severe anemia due to esophageal ulcer. Strengthening the spleen. Yeah, maybe. I think like the spleen is a source of blood, so you can think about like if we want to create blood, there's going to be something going on there. To To me, I'll just say generally, to me, this is very difficult because we're mixing Western and Chinese and TCM. And to me, it's a very easy trap to fall into. A lot of people will do that. I wouldn't go that route. It's kind of like you're taking it's sometimes I use this analogy of metric versus imperial. I'm in America, we still use inches. You don't want to take your measurements in metric and then use tools that are imperial. Or you don't want to say like, oh, I got out my ruler that is then this measures 3.2 centimeters. Here I'm gonna cut it using my 3.2 centimeters. That would be like an inch and a half maybe. Anyway. You don't want to diagnose in Western and treat in Chinese. If you're going to treat using TCM, you need to diagnose using TCM. So anemia, maybe that's blood deficiency, maybe it's not. If you want to tonify the spleen and tonify blood, diagnose them in terms of Chinese medicine. Do they have signs and symptoms of blood deficiency from a Chinese medicine perspective? Do they have pale skin, fatigue, cold body, weak and brittle nails, things like that? Diagnose them in TCM and then treat them according to TCM. So I'd look at it that way, look at their tongue and pulse from a TCM perspective. So I feel like this is a common thing, and this is like I think this is one of those reasons why I don't like integrative medicine. I feel like most schools are going to the show like, oh, integrative medicine. If you want to integrate your medicine in terms of practitioners, that's fine. If somebody goes and sees a cardiologist and then after that they go and see an acupuncturist, that's totally fine. Integrate the two. I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. I think the problem with integrative medicine is the practitioners themselves try to integrate two different things and it doesn't work. People try to they'll take an iron, they'll do some blood test and get their iron levels and try to correlate that to we need to give this person Shu Di Huang. I think that does not work. Again, I think that's like you're measuring in metric and then you're using tools that are imperial. And if you wanna do Chinese medicine, diagnose in Chinese medicine, treat in Chinese medicine, that will work. Don't ride two different horses. Boop, boop, ba-doo. Do you have a general and formula in mind that would help acupuncturists keep their hands more steady? I suppose this depends. Are we actually talking about like a tremor? Again, we have to see like why are the hands not steady? Does this picture seem oversaturated to you? I just was looking at my camera. I hope my microphone is okay. I feel like last time my microphone gain was set too high and I was peeking out a lot. What were we talking about? Keeping the hands steady. I don't know. Again, it depends on why are your hands not steady. I mean, I think usually anytime, really when, at least when I'm dealing with most students, and unless they're elderly students, if their hands are not steady, it's because, they drank too much caffeine. So it's first of all, are you taking too many stimulants? Are you a calm, collected person? Maybe there's wind due to blood deficiency, or maybe there's wind due to something else. So if that's a systemic problem, treat that. I'd say in terms of hands, I think this is something that we kind of said something about this on the podcast recently with Zach when he talked about finger strengthening exercises and how people don't actually do that anymore. But I would think about if you're an acupuncturist, you're someone that works with your hands. Your hands are your tools. So think about developing your hands as your tools. So when they talked about using those Bao Ding balls, I just thought I hope I don't actually accidentally say Benoit balls, because Benoit balls and Bao Ding balls are very different. But the larger balls that you move around in your hands, we often Sometimes prescribe those to people who are post-stroke and they have some weakness or numbness in their hands that twirling those big steel balls around in their hands will one strengthen their hands, but also they stimulate the various points on the hand to help chi get into the hand and strengthen that. So think about things like that. There are qigong techniques where you're thinking about bringing chi into your hands. I don't remember what we called it. I did that for a while with Bill Helm at the Taoist Sanctuary when he was some specific Neigong techniques that were. So basically, we I'm not sure if this class still exists anymore, but there used to be a class where it was a requirement that you had to take regular qigong, which was like your own qigong practice, and then as an elective they had a medical qigong, which is like, can you do qigong on other people? And so as part of that, we would practice certain qigong methods that were about bringing qi into the hands. So that's another thing you can think about, is either doing physical exercises like twirling your Baoding balls, or doing your needle exercises. Do I still have a needle over here? I think some of the things, like one of the things one of my Chinese teachers told me is they would get a guide tube and they would just twirl their guide tube like this. And it's something that it doesn't seem like you're doing a whole lot, but like if you just sit and do this for a minute, like your hand starts to ache. It's like you can feel this in your thenar eminence and the other finger. So that was one of their basic hand strengthening techniques. And then they also did things where like they would practice stabbing. So like you could start with something like a tissue, something very soft, and practice very deliberately stabbing it in. And then you build up to a piece of paper and then several pieces of paper, and you're trying to strengthen your hand. So I'm thinking that would do something as well. Where are we? Okay. Thyroid removed due to nodules, complaining of cold hands and feet, numbness and tingling in lower legs, hair loss. Is this liver yang rising? Again, you would want to do a full workup. I wouldn't think so. When I think of liver yang rising, think of like excess going to the head. Think about eye problems, dry eyes, red eyes, itchy eyes, headache, swirling sensation, dizziness, things like that. Stuff is going upward. Cold hands and feet, I would think, is just more like you would have to see what exactly is causing that. That could be a false cold. Maybe there's stagnation not going to the extremities. Maybe there's yang deficiency. Maybe there's blood deficiency. So that could be a lot of things. But just off the bat, that doesn't sound like liver yang rising. But it kind of depends. Oh, is it liver qi stagnation? Kind of depends. It's possible, but you would want to look at some of those other. Oh, sorry, I just got a text message. I didn't know he had my phone number. That's cool. Oh no, okay. Again, when we have cold hands and feet, it's basically like we have those two different formulas. We have Suni Tang and Suni San. Frigid extremities powder and frigid extremities decoction. We also have Dongui Suni Tang, Dongui frigid extremities decoction. And so all of them treat cold hands and feet. So we have to be able to differentiate based on the other signs and symptoms. Is there a yang deficiency, that there's not enough yang getting to the extremities? Usually, I think with that they say, technically with Suni Tang, they say cold hands up to the elbow. Whereas with Dongui Suni Tang, they say cold hands up to the wrist, because that's cold hands and feet due to blood deficiency. Or we can have cold hands and feet due to liver qi stagnation. So you would want to look at the other things like, is the pulse wiry? Or Are there other signs of stagnation? Is it cold hands and feet with a warm body? Then you might look more towards liver qi stagnation, where it's like, do they have cold hands and feet, but other accompanying signs of blood deficiency, or is there yang deficiency? Stuff like that. So, boop 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 boop. Postpartum rashes. Yeah, again, I don't want to get into specific things. It's you would want to just do a pattern diagnosis. And that's kind of my thing is maybe this is bad. This is a bad thing to say, but like sometimes this would happen where it's like a person would come in with a chief complaint. I was like, I'm not entirely sure, but it's like they have a very clear underlying pattern, and as long as you treat that pattern, a lot of times the stuff will get better, even if you're not entirely sure why that pattern causes that. And so if you're like, oh, the person has rashes, but they have like 10 other signs and symptoms of blood deficiency, even if I can't really explain how blood deficiency leads to rashes, we can say, oh, maybe there's blood deficiency and that leads to some internal wind and that's getting presenting as a rash, or maybe there's some blood deficiency and that's allowing this other pathogen. Maybe the blood's not anchoring the yang, so it floats upward and you have heat expressed on the surface. Or even if you can't explain, if they have like very clearly liver blood deficiency, if you just treat the liver blood, it will help. So that's kind of a weird thing to say, but sometimes it just helps. It would be better if you like actually knew the step-by-step process of how the symptom occurred. But there are those times where it's like, I don't know, I'm just going to treat their pattern, and usually good things happen. Okay, anything else? I was gonna like cut this off at an hour. We're getting close. Trying to see if there's anything else fun here. I feel like before I had questions that I didn't get to. Oh, maybe I deleted that. Because I had a few ones that were like, you don't pronounce herbs correctly. I got several comments about people were upset about my pronunciation of the word herb or herbology. I was like, it's herbs, it has an H. And I'm like, you got a new king. Who's the new heir to the throne? Do you say heir or heir? Are you an honest person or a honest person? And it turns out the word herb actually comes from the French herb, where it was initially spelled E-R-B. And then it was just sometime in the early 1900s that English people started pronouncing the H. So originally when it came over to England, it was pronounced herb. And then when people went to America, they continued pronouncing it herbs. And then somewhere in the 1900s, some English people just decided they wanted to be different, and they started pronouncing the H and said herb. And so that's actually a very recent thing that that English people say herb, that the original correct version is herb. Herbology, just like you would say honest or our or heir to the throne. Looking to see if there's anything else. Is there anything on the lung channel for cats? I don't know if that means like you have a cat allergy or if you're trying to treat cats, but somebody just wrote, is there anything on the lung channel for cats? I don't know. Boop, 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 boop. Let me know if there's anything else. And again, I don't like to answer like specific. I'm trying to be like educational, but not answer like specific health questions, because there's an ethical thing where I don't want to. I can't give advice without knowing the full story. Partly it's like I don't want to get sued for giving out medical advice. So that's why I have an aversion to like some like specific health questions. So if you have certain disorders, go see an acupuncturist, or at least get someone who can like look at the full thing in person, look at the tongue, take the pulse, do a full intake. It's hard to. That's another thing about boards is they like to give you like case studies that are 3 sentences long. It's like really you would want to look at the person, see how they walk, hear their voice, ask the 10 questions, take the pulse, look at the tongue, and get an idea of what's going on. It's very hard to say like diagnose someone from 3 sentences. So I don't want to give out bad things, bad advice. Boop, boop, ba-doop, boop, boo. Sorry, I'm just going through the YouTube comments to see if there's anything fun and interesting. Sorry, next time I'll be more prepared. Last time I like prepared some questions ahead of time, and then so many people asked questions I never got to them. So I thought, oh, that's what it'll be like this time. Why is pericardium 6 used for liver qi stagnation? I think the simple answer is it's a Lowell connecting point, and that's one of the things that Lowell connecting points can do. They can move qi and blood. And I think that's something that Maciocia refers to as like the deeper aspects of the Lowell channels. Another way we can think about it is basically in Wang Juyi's Applied Channel Theory book, he has certain point pairs or point combinations, and he has a section where he specifically talks about point combinations for liver qi stagnation. So of course we talk about 4 gates, liver 3, Li 4. But then he divides it up into certain yang point combinations and yin point combinations. So for his yang point pairs, he has GB41 Sanjiao 5 and GB34 Sanjiao 6. And for his liver ones, he has liver 5 pericardium 6 and liver 8 pericardium 8. So liver 2 pericardium 8. Liver 2 pericardium 8, those are both fire points. So if you have some stagnation with fire, of course the liver 2 pericardium 8 would also help drain the heat. But basically he has this saying that basically for excess conditions and heat conditions, you're more likely to go to yang channels. For deficiency conditions and cold conditions, you're more likely to go to yin channels. And so that's kind of the idea here, at least my interpretation with liver 5, pericardium 6. He uses this analogy of like if you have a blanket, you're shaking out the wrinkles on the blanket. I think he says something like that. But I think of it like, remember we can have liver qi stagnation due to deficiency. When we say the liver is yin in form but yang in function, think about formulas like Iguanjin, linking decoction. Iguanjin is a formula for liver qi stagnation due to liver yin deficiency, liver blood deficiency. We can even see this with the Dueyao pair, Chai Hu plus Bai Shao. Chai Hu is acrid, dispersing, it moves the qi, but Bai Shao is nourishing, restraining, it softens the liver and nourishes the liver. So we could say that if the liver is deficient, it will fail in its function of moving qi. And so that's why we could say that if the liver, maybe it's an excess condition and the qi is stuck, or maybe the liver is tired, it's tense, it's deficient, and because it's not working right, it can't perform its function of moving the qi. So I think of liver 5 and pericardium 6 kind of like that when Maciocia talks about the deeper aspects of the Lowell connecting channels, is they also are able to have a tonifying effect. And so it's kind of like it's like those are using Lowell connecting points to kind of soften and relax the liver so that it can perform its function of moving qi. So I think if you wanted to move liver qi more directly, like in like Gallbladder 34, Sanjiao 6, I might think about that more like a Chaihu Shugan san, where we're dredging the liver, we're dredging and draining the liver, that we're very directly moving things. Whereas I might think of liver 5, pericardium 6 more like an Iguan Jin, where we're nourishing and softening, and by doing that, then the liver chi can move smoothly. So, any books regarding Korean 4-needle, any approach in the clinic? So I had that YouTube video. Does this button still work? I had a YouTube video on a 4-point needle technique, and let's go to the actual video. So I had a video going over a 4-point needle technique, and there are some handouts that go with it. I feel like I may have made you sign up for the email list in order to get the handouts, but there are handouts that go with it. So this was just explaining like how do you find these 4 points, what's the underlying theory behind it. But then after that, I went and did a podcast with Zach Louis. So you go to podcast.tcmstudy.net. This latest one is a podcast with Zach Louis, and he uses this a lot in the clinic. So here we kind of talk a little bit more. First, we talk about the history of where did this come from, this Korean monk named Sa-am. Where did this come from? And then he gets into like how he uses this in the clinic and like what situations he would use this in, what techniques he used for tonification and sedation, because we say we tonify certain points, we sedate certain points. And it's kind of interesting because Zach is like a shaman. He's a shaman priest. He's a master of medical qigong, a Reiki master, and does all these other esoteric things. So it's kind of bringing that into it, and the fact that, and so it's kind of interesting that Sa-am was an esoteric Buddhist. So it's an interesting conversation. So you can look there. I also uploaded a clip of that to the YouTube channel. I think that just came out this morning. YouTube channel, here we go. I just took, like, this is a clip from the podcast, so if you want to, like, actually see us talk, you can look at that clip or go listen to the whole thing on the podcast. Look, go to your Apple Podcast or your Spotify and look for Drunken Acupuncture Podcast. So that goes a little bit more of how to use it in a clinic. Books where I actually don't know. I feel like I knew students. I had a student who got into SOM acupuncture, and he had a book. So I don't know. Maybe that's another thing if you want to look more into it. And if you just look up 4-point needle technique, you might not find a whole lot. If you look up SOM acupuncture, you might find a little bit more. Is this out of print? Paperback from $60. That sounds like it's out of print. I would go to your library before I spent $60 on a paperback book. So I don't know of any books in particular. Again, actually, I kind of made this video about 4-needle technique when I actually don't know a whole lot about the technique and its clinical use. It's just something that comes up in the acupuncture curriculum. So I was just trying to give a basic overwork of like, if you get like 1 or 2 questions on a test, how do you understand why these points are chosen? As far as its application, I haven't used it much in clinic, so I don't know a whole lot about it. What would you recommend women during menses as lifestyle advice? Ooh, this gets really... I feel like this gets really controversial. Because like when I did yoga, a lot of people would say straight up, do not do yoga, or don't do asanas while you're on your period. And then I said that to people, and then they some women got very angry about that. Like, who is this man telling me what I should do during my period? It's like, well, that's what a yogic nun told me. Like a group of women who studied yoga in India told me, don't do it. Don't do asanas during your period. Then some other people will say more specifically, don't do inversions during your period. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of people say a lot of different things. And in terms of lifestyle advice, I would say maybe it depends on what specifically you're experiencing. If you just have a normal regular cycle versus if you experience symptoms beforehand or if you feel very tired afterwards, you could I would say, like, in terms of regulating the cycle, think about the entire cycle. We divided it up into like a chi, blood, yin, and yang phase. So think about what you can be doing at each stage in there. It's like if you get PMS symptoms 2 days before your period, don't wait until you get PMS symptoms to start addressing it. It's like if you have signs and symptoms of chi and blood stagnation, you probably want to start working on that on day 14. Don't wait until day 22 when you experience the symptoms. So think about it. Think about harmonizing your entire cycle in terms of that chi, blood, yin, and yang phase. So think about, like, at some point you just lost a lot of blood, so you can nourish blood, eat red meat, or do whatever you need to nourish blood. So at the first you're at a building phase where you're nourishing the blood, and then it switches over to where you're trying to create movement. So think about preventing stagnation at that point. But in terms of like during the period, I think it kind of depends depends on the person. Like there are even some people, like I think like traditionally, like in Taoist things, they would say don't have sex during your period, and then other women will be like, having sex during my period alleviates a lot of the symptoms, or like if I have painful periods, then that actually helps. So I don't really know. I think people say different things, and different things work for different people. So in terms of resting or move around, I don't know. I think it depends on whether it's excess or deficiency. And again, I would think about like usually I don't try to treat things during the period. I guess that's another thing is like, should you get acupuncture during your period? I think it kind of depends, and I think it kind of depends on what you're doing. So some people will flat out say, no, don't come in for acupuncture if you're on your period. Other people will say, oh, maybe we'll just do a light treatment or something like that. I think it kind of depends on what's going on, and it depends on the person. But generally, I would prefer not to treat period things during the period. I think it's kind of like that. Don't wait until you're thirsty to begin digging a well. If you have period problems, think about that. Think about harmonizing the other parts of the cycle, and then that will make the actual period itself go smoother. What do you say about cosmetic acupuncture versus red light or infrared light therapy for easing wrinkles? I honestly don't know a whole lot about red light therapy. I think some people are really into it. Some people think it's a bunch of hooey, so I don't know. Cosmetic acupuncture, I don't know a whole lot about. I think this is, again, some people take different approaches to it. I've had some teachers who did cosmetic acupuncture, and they're just like, oh, you have a wrinkle here? Stick a needle in the wrinkle. And that's about the extent of it. Other people, like, I want to say like East Harridan gets more into like the musculature and the anatomy of, if we stimulate certain muscles, how will that affect the shape of the face and things like that. So I think different people take different approaches to it. Just like, oh, take some sterins and stick them in the wrinkles, and then use some egg wash and pearl powder and use that. Red light, I don't know a whole lot about. But I do have people I know people who do cosmetic acupuncture, and they say it works very well. That when I had a friend in Kentucky who did it, and she was like, she had patients come in that normally they get Botox. I guess that's a thing that women do, is they have like monthly Botox treatments. But they would say, oh yeah, I used to go in once a month to get Botox, but now I do the facial acupuncture, the cosmetic acupuncture, because it works better. So apparently there are people in Kentucky who believe that acupuncture is more effective than Botox. Yeah, red lights, I don't know a lot about. this is one of those things where like I tend to do more like I just kind of stick towards Chinese medicine. And Zhongjing didn't have red lights, so I never looked into it very much. Not to discredit it or say that it's not worth looking into. It's just something that I haven't actually researched or used, so I don't want to comment on it. Okay, we're about at an hour. I think I'm gonna say call it quits at that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me on a Friday morning. I was planning on waiting until next week to do the rest of the single herbs, but somebody messaged me and said that their syllabus had been moved up a week, so I think tomorrow I'm gonna do some herbs. I'll do an herb lecture. So with basically Herbology 2, we're gonna go through Herbology 2 this semester because I have a video for wind dampness or herbs that treat bee syndrome. I have a video for the first section of phlegm, cool and transform phlegm heat. I don't have a video for warm and transform cold phlegm. So tomorrow there's going to be a live stream where we go over transform cold phlegm, and then we'll go through the rest of the probably one category a week. Herbs that relieve coughing and wheezing, I think, is a very short category. Aromatic herbs that transform dampness is also a relatively short category. I think it's kind of like there are 8 herbs, but we only really care about the first 3. Herbs that relieve food stagnation, also a relatively short category. I think when you get into regulate qi and regulate blood, those are much longer categories. But that's kind of the plan for. I think on Fridays we're going to do Q&As. On Saturdays we'll do herb lectures. So that's the plan for now. If you want more stuff, oh good. Oh, sorry, I need to. There are very useful lectures about Psalm 4 needle on HP Kim website. I think his website is like Acupuncture Media Works. So that's good to know. So if you want more about 4-point needle technique, his website is acupuncturemedia.com. I'm not sure if this would be like clinical courses, because I feel like that would be more like your NCCM review, but maybe that's different. What are his free webinars? He's got a lot of free webinars coming up. Go watch HB Kim. So I don't know if he has past webinars about SOM, or if it's something that you need to or if he has other things you can look at. Yin Yang balancing, Korean 4-point needle, 10 PDAs. So yeah, it looks like you could. He has a course there on continuing education course there. So apparently that's good. So you can go look at that if you want to. $520. I wonder if that means you get all of them for $520. Maybe I should start charging $520 for my courses. I bet I could pay my rent with that. Anyway, thanks for being here. Please be sure to sign up for the email list and get updates about when things happen. There'll also be some additional content coming out that you can get over email. So there's a link below to sign up for the email list. Follow me on Instagram. I've been posting stuff on Instagram. I'm trying to do some shorts now. I'm not very good at making shorts, or reels, I guess is what they're called on Instagram. On YouTube, they're called shorts. Go there. Sorry, I'm not going to make any acupuncture videos for a while. I'm focusing on herbs right now, so I'm going to re-record my single herb review course. That's going to take the next couple. I've been saying I'm going to do that, and I still haven't gotten around to it. So that's what I'm going to do for the next couple weeks. And then after I get that stuff, I'll get back to the. Yeah, of courses. This is a sign that my marketing is very bad. They're just herb courses. If you go here, resources, review courses, I have one that's just reviews all of the single herbs. I have one that reviews all of the formulas. So I do have they're just herb review courses. Some point, I'll make continuing education courses. That's probably going to be like 2 years from now. We'll make a course about classical statements in Chinese medicine or other stuff. So, boop, 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 boop. Okay, I'm really going now. I need to go check on the cat. He was very zoomy this morning, so I'm sure he's very upset that I locked him in the bedroom. He's probably dug up all the carpet. So thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. We'll do this again next week. We'll do herbs tomorrow, and then we'll do more stuff next week. So if you have questions, come back next week. We'll do it then. Thanks for being here. See you next time.